As the family arrived at the Grand Hotel lobby in downtown Chicago, everything looked perfect. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and the marble floors reflected a sense of luxury. Mark stood silently behind his parents and younger brother, Ethan, waiting for the inevitable disappointment. His parents stepped forward confidently, checking into the suite they had reserved, or rather, the suite reserved exclusively for Ethan. As the receptionist smiled politely, confirming their reservation, Mark remained forgotten at the back. He noticed Ethan's smug smile and felt a familiar sting of jealousy. But this time, Mark wasn't upset. Instead, a quiet sense of satisfaction brewed inside him, a secret he kept carefully hidden. His parents had no idea what was coming, and for once, Mark was ready. Growing up, Ethan had always been the star, while Mark stayed in the shadows. Ethan's birthdays brought lavish celebrations, mountains of gifts, and endless praise. Mark's birthdays were quiet, filled only with small gifts and brief nods of acknowledgement. Even school was different. Ethan's education was financed effortlessly, but Mark worked tirelessly at part-time jobs, struggling through student loans and sleepless nights. Despite his sacrifices, Mark felt invisible. Year after year, he silently accepted his position as second best. But something had changed. Mark, now 28, successful and financially independent, finally realized his worth. This family vacation was his opportunity. He wouldn't quietly fade into the background this time. Mark was determined to rewrite the script and finally gain control over his own narrative. The receptionist frowned slightly, tapping away at her keyboard. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Davis, but I don't see any reservation under your name," she announced softly. Mark watched as confusion and annoyance spread across his mother's face. His father quickly intervened, voice firm, demanding clarity. Mark felt a quiet excitement rise in his chest, taking a step forward and calmly stating, "Actually, the reservation is under my name." His family turned abruptly, stunned. Mark calmly showed his phone, clearly displaying his confirmed reservation for the luxury penthouse suite. Silence settled over the lobby, disbelief evident in their faces. Ethan's expression quickly shifted from confusion to frustration. Mark smiled confidently, relishing this rare moment of victory, and said, "I booked the penthouse. Enjoy your couch." The penthouse suite was breathtaking. Mark entered alone, savoring every detail. The wide windows overlooking Lake Michigan, polished hardwood floors, and plush furniture exuding comfort and sophistication. The massive master bedroom felt like an earned luxury. He sprawled across the king-sized bed, the soft fabric beneath him a symbol of triumph. Then came the sharp knock he had been expecting. Opening the door, Mark found Ethan fuming, their parents close behind. "You can't do this," Ethan snapped angrily. Mark leaned casually against the doorway, calm and unbothered. "I already did," he replied softly. His parents exchanged frustrated glances, visibly uncomfortable with Mark's newfound defiance. Mark held firm, enjoying their discomfort, finally experiencing the power of putting himself first. For the first time, Mark felt in control, and it felt amazing. Breakfast was tense. The hotel's bright dining room buzzed with chatter, but Mark's family sat silently. His father cleared his throat, carefully suggesting they find another suite. Mark raised an eyebrow, knowing exactly where this was going. His mother quickly chimed in, mentioning how much more comfortable Ethan would be in a larger room. Mark's jaw tightened slightly, refusing to fall for the old manipulation. Calmly sipping his coffee, he firmly replied, "I booked my suite. If you want another, you can pay for it yourselves." Ethan glared, frustration flickering in his eyes. Mark, however, felt empowered. He'd spent years making compromises. This vacation was different. This time, he wouldn't back down. For once, Mark felt no guilt, only a quiet, liberating pride. The city alone. Chicago felt brighter somehow, the breeze off the lake cool and comforting. Wandering into a small cafe, he savored his independence, undisturbed by family drama. Suddenly, his phone buzzed. It was his mother, suggesting dinner together as an apology. Mark hesitated briefly, cautious but hopeful. Perhaps they were finally understanding how unfairly they'd treated him. He agreed reluctantly, unaware of the trap awaiting him. Arriving at the upscale restaurant, he immediately sensed something was wrong. His family sat waiting, expressions overly pleasant. Ethan barely looked up, stirring his drink absent-mindedly. Unease filled Mark's stomach. As dinner progressed, their conversation turned strangely cordial, making Mark wary. He realized too late that this was another carefully crafted deception. Midway through the meal, Mark's father casually mentioned a phone call with hotel management. Mark instantly knew something had gone terribly wrong. His mother smiled faintly, explaining gently that a mistake occurred. Apparently, Mark's penthouse reservation was mistakenly double-booked. Mark's heart raced, his hands growing cold. Ethan's smirk revealed the truth. They had manipulated the situation. Quiet anger burned inside Mark as he listened. The betrayal stung sharply. Taking a deep breath, he calmly challenged their lies, refusing to surrender his position. His family tried reasoning, twisting words to pressure him, but Mark wouldn't be swayed. Finally, rising from the table, he firmly stated, "I'm done playing along," and walked out. Mark felt hurt yet fiercely resolved, determined to reclaim his dignity. Mark returned swiftly to the hotel, approaching the front desk. Confronting the manager directly, he demanded clarity. Nervously, the manager confessed that Mark's parents indeed called, claiming his reservation was made in error. Mark carefully displayed his proof, asserting control. His steady voice hid the deep anger bubbling beneath the surface. "This reservation belongs solely to me," he clarified sharply. The manager, visibly embarrassed, quickly promised to protect Mark's room from future interference. Relief flooded Mark's chest, a quiet victory firmly secured. Upstairs, alone in his luxurious penthouse, he took a deep breath, embracing this newfound strength. Though the betrayal cut deep, Mark realized clearly. The past was behind him now. He would no longer quietly accept disrespect. This was his moment to stand strong. Mark woke refreshed, sunlight gently filtering through tall windows. His suite was peaceful, untouched by family drama. Checking his phone, messages flooded the screen. Urgent apologies mixed with accusations from his parents and Ethan. Quietly, he silenced them all, refusing further manipulation. Mark knew it wasn't over, but today belonged only to him. Stepping onto the terrace, he breathed in fresh air, the city sprawling beautifully beneath him. Calmness filled Mark's heart, a feeling unfamiliar but welcome. Soon, a clever thought crossed his mind. If his family wanted games, he'd play, this time on his terms. Determined, he dressed quickly, pocketed his wallet, and headed downstairs. Mark would teach them a lesson they'd never forget. It was his turn to set the rules. Approaching the concierge, Mark smiled warmly. Politely, he requested a luxurious spa treatment, casually mentioning the charges would go to his parents' room. The concierge hesitated briefly, but with a gentle nod and subtle gratitude, swiftly arranged it. Mark relaxed fully under skilled hands, tension leaving his body. Afterwards, revitalized, he browsed the hotel boutique, selecting expensive souvenirs, a silk tie, designer cufflinks, and an elegant leather wallet. Each item carefully chosen, representing every ignored birthday or overlooked achievement. As purchases stacked up, satisfaction blossomed within Mark. Each extravagant charge, billed directly to his parents, symbolized years of mistreatment now balanced in his favor. Mark smiled gently, embracing this overdue justice. For the first time ever, he felt truly vindicated, finally claiming his worth. As evening approached, Mark arranged one final surprise. Contacting room service, he requested a private romantic dinner setup delivered exclusively to his parents' room, for two only, deliberately excluding Ethan. Candles, champagne, and rose petals completed the elaborate scene. Moments later, an angry text from his mother lit Mark's phone, confusion and frustration clear. Mark's calm reply was simple yet powerful, pointing out how often they'd prioritized Ethan. Silence followed, his point perfectly delivered. Soon, another message came. Hotel management called regarding the unexplained charges. Mark calmly instructed the manager to remind his parents about their earlier attempts to manipulate his reservation. He hung up, satisfied. They had finally felt the sting of being disregarded. Mark settled comfortably into his chair, embracing this victorious moment. An angry knock echoed urgently at Mark's suite door late that night. Calmly, he opened it, facing the furious expressions of his parents and Ethan. His father demanded explanations, clearly furious about the mounting charges. Mark leaned comfortably against the doorway, gently stating, "I simply treated you exactly as you've treated me." His mother's cheeks flushed deeply, words faltering as Ethan stood silent, frustrated beyond words. Mark's calm demeanor intensified their anger, yet he remained unaffected, his heart finally free from guilt. Quietly, he stated his final truth. Maybe now you'll understand how it feels." Their silence was deafening. Mark slowly closed the door, leaving them stunned. Returning inside, he felt lighter than ever, free from their control, finally at peace with his actions. Morning sunlight streamed warmly into Mark's penthouse, bathing the elegant room in golden hues. Stretching leisurely, he felt peaceful, genuinely happy for the first time in years. Checking out later, he noticed his family had left early, no goodbyes exchanged. Surprisingly, relief replaced any lingering sadness. At the lobby, the hotel manager greeted him warmly, subtly amused, hinting Mark's parents had departed visibly upset. Mark nodded, offering a generous tip, thanking him for safeguarding his privacy. Outside, the city air was crisp, refreshing, and welcoming. Mark walked confidently through bustling streets, embracing this newfound freedom. He felt empowered, finally detached from his family's manipulative grip. His actions had shattered years of imbalance, and Mark now stood taller, stronger, fully in charge of his own destiny. Months passed quietly, with Mark embracing his independence fully. He found happiness in simple moments, morning coffees alone, quiet evening strolls through neighborhood parks, and enjoying his successful career without family interference. However, his phone remained silent, no apologies or attempts at reconciliation from his family. Though initially painful, Mark eventually welcomed their absence, finding strength in solitude. Yet, a small part of him still wondered if they had truly understood the lesson. One afternoon, a package arrived unexpectedly. Curiously opening it, Mark found photographs from their vacation, carefully framed memories that deliberately excluded him. A bitter sting returned briefly. Despite everything, they still wanted to hurt him. Mark breathed deeply, understanding clearly that some wounds wouldn't heal, but finally knowing he didn't have to carry them alone. Determined to close this painful chapter forever, Mark invited a close friend for dinner. Over comforting meals and heartfelt conversations, he shared the pent-up frustrations and quiet victories he'd carried secretly. Expressing everything openly felt liberating, freeing him fully from resentment's heavy weight. His friend listened carefully, gently reassuring Mark of his worth, reinforcing that family isn't always defined by blood, but by support and genuine love. Mark finally accepted this truth, heart lighter, surrounded now by people who truly valued him. As the evening ended, gratitude replaced bitterness completely. The past felt distant, powerless to hurt him anymore. Mark realized he'd conquered his greatest fear, letting go. That night, peace filled his heart, knowing he had reclaimed his life on his own terms. Nearly a year later, Mark attended a prestigious company gala. He dressed sharply, exuding confidence. A successful executive respected among peers. During the event, he noticed familiar faces, his parents and Ethan standing awkwardly nearby. They looked smaller somehow, humbled and uncertain. His mother glanced over hesitantly, their eyes briefly meeting. Mark remained composed, heart steady. Eventually, his father approached carefully, voice strained, softly admitting their past mistakes. Mark listened calmly, feeling neither anger nor relief. Quietly, he acknowledged their apology but made no promises of reconciliation. The conversation ended politely but distantly, a clear boundary drawn firmly by Mark. Walking away confidently, Mark realized he'd grown beyond their shadows, finally respected for who he truly was, not as second best, but as himself. After the gala, Mark stepped outside into the cool night air. Stars shimmered gently above, the city alive and vibrant around him. He felt calm, deeply satisfied knowing he'd finally stood his ground. Walking toward his car, footsteps echoed softly behind him. Ethan approached cautiously, uncertainty clouding his face. Quietly, Ethan apologized, admitting jealousy had driven their strained relationship. Mark listened silently, recognizing sincerity in Ethan's words for the first time. Without bitterness, Mark accepted his brother's apology, acknowledging they could never rewrite their past. Still, he felt no urgency to rebuild their bond. As Ethan walked away slowly, Mark felt a surprising relief. Forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was freedom. Finally, he knew exactly who he was, and nothing would shake his peace again. In the weeks that followed, Mark noticed subtle changes. Friends commented on his newfound confidence, colleagues praised his clarity and decisiveness. Even strangers seemed more drawn to his quiet strength. Mark had learned his worth, no longer bending to anyone else's expectations. One afternoon, he received an email from Ethan, respectfully reaching out. Mark read the words carefully, sensing genuine remorse. Yet he calmly replied, establishing clear boundaries. Their relationship would remain distant, built solely on mutual respect rather than obligation. As he clicked send, Mark felt completely empowered. His life was fully his own now, no longer overshadowed by family expectations. This independence brought Mark a deeper peace, finally free from old wounds, creating space for happiness he had always deserved, but rarely experienced. Nearly 2 years later, Mark relaxed on vacation alone, lounging peacefully near an ocean sunset. Waves gently crashed nearby, the salty breeze refreshing and soothing. Reflecting quietly, Mark knew he had fully moved forward. Time had transformed bitterness into strength, resentment into calm wisdom. He'd forgiven his family internally, accepting the scars they'd left without resentment. Mark smiled softly, watching vibrant colors dance across the horizon, grateful for every step of his journey. Independence had reshaped him entirely. He was resilient, confident, and utterly content. Old memories faded gracefully, overshadowed now by genuine happiness. Peaceful and untroubled, Mark finally understood the true meaning of freedom. He was no longer defined by others, his identity entirely his own, proudly built from challenges he had overcome alone. Today, Mark lives fully, successful, peaceful, and respected. His journey wasn't easy, yet every struggle had led him exactly here. Choosing himself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Now he cherishes genuine friendships, rewarding career achievements, and quiet moments of solitude. The past shaped him, but it no longer controls him. Mark's story became powerful, inspiring others to reclaim their worth too. If you liked Mark's, share your thoughts below. Did he handle things right? Could you have done the same? Don't forget to like, share, smallword, and subscribe for more dramatic stories that challenge us to think deeply about life and family dynamics.